In Spokane, Washington, during the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, there was a quiet difference palpable in the air. The mood a little less cheerful, the voices a little more quiet. Men held onto their wives' hands, and children were carried or placed in strollers or grocery carts. The toy aisles were empty of little boys and girls dreaming of what they might get on Christmas morning. One could say that a dark pall had been cast over the city. On December 11th, a horrific crime scene had been discovered in a home on East Oak Street. A neighbor had stopped by to deliver a pie to the Paul family. Upon finding the front door cracked open just a bit, one Mrs. Jane Ketchum had gently pushed open the door while announcing her arrival. "Hello? Christine? Hello?" she'd called out before entering the kitchen area, where she then found her friend under the kitchen table. One leg was bent in an impossible and unnatural way. Her blonde hair was matted down with a dark brownish red substance. Her right eye was open, but as it was just under the matted hair, she could see that it was bulging nearly to the point of popping right out of the socket. She dropped the pie and ran home to call the police. The two Paul children had suffered the same fate, seemingly while nestled in their beds. Mr. Paul was found in the basement, still wearing his robe, his head in the laundry basket, his body across the room. That was the day they began. And soon, in rapid succession, there was another family found in the same manner, bludgeoned and or beheaded. It didn't seem to matter the sex of the children nor their age. It didn't seem to matter the wealth of the parents. Upper middle class, the families living paycheck to paycheck, the well-off, no one was safe. No one felt that they could be spared, and the horror they were seeing nearly daily on their news was frightening them deeply. The detectives were baffled. Not only were there seemingly no clues, no fingerprints, no blood of the attacker, but they could not even find one connection between these families. They didn't work together. They didn't attend the same churches or schools. There were no family connections. Nothing. And how could the police department stop this brutal killer if there weren't any clues at all, and absolutely nowhere to start? It rocked the city to its core. No one felt safe. The police were on TV day and night, speaking of vigilance and locking your doors. One thing they had not released to the public was that none of the 12 homes had been broken into. Not even one. They went on to state that it was imperative to be careful about strangers or anyone looking for directions or a lost pet, a broken down vehicle. But the reality was that they had no clue how someone got the upper hand on all of the murdered adults. How were they getting to them? How were they trusting someone? Many of the victims' friends and family pointed out that their sister or brother or cousin would never answer the door for a stranger, that they didn't believe that they'd let someone in, especially while their children were home. So, how then? The detectives pondered, well knowing that they were behind the 8 ball on this. It was Christmas time, and very soon even more people just might be inclined to let in a stranger. And the public fear was amplifying every day. John Crowder was an upstanding guy. He'd worked at the same company, a soda distribution center, for 20 years. He attended the same church since he was a child. In fact, he was married in that church to the love of his life, Kim Ann, and all 3 of their children had been baptized in the same church as well. In John's spare time, he coached his son's Little League teams, and he never missed watching his daughter at her gymnastic classes. When he and his wife began having children, they'd agreed that she'd take some time off nursing and stay at home with their children, and she loved it. She organized book drives and play dates and neighborhood parties for every single holiday. He always did the right thing by everyone. He was always the guy you could count on to help you move, to mow your lawn if you'd broken your leg. He would take extra shifts within an hour's notice if someone didn't show or was sick. John and Kim Ann Crowder could not have been happier. Then, just after Thanksgiving, when John was sure that he was going to be promoted when his boss retired, and he and Kim Ann would lay in bed at night talking about vacations they'd be able to afford, they'd finally be able to get cable, and they desperately needed a new car between the kids growing up and having activities to getting Kim Ann starting to take night classes here and there. John was called into the HR department. His heart was racing and his palms sweating. He was practicing in his head just how he'd sound shocked, surprised, and grateful. "Don't forget to shake hands," he was saying to himself as he opened the door, and the HR supervisor casually, with barely a look, waved him into her office and asked him to close the door and take a seat. John had been expecting her to stand up and was going to shake her hand. Now his hand was partly extended, and he quickly put it in his pocket. She was looking between a computer screen and the papers on her desk. John sat and waited, feeling very much like a child in the principal's office. Finally, she shuffled some papers and began to read one to herself. "John," she began, "you've been here for quite a long time. You are a great employee." "Well, thank you," beamed John, like a schoolboy. She opened her desk drawer and took out an envelope and started to tap the edge on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. "John, as I'm sure you know, old Barney Hodges is retiring." Here it comes, thought John, so excited he could hardly sit still. "Yes, ma'am, I'm aware. Well, what you may not know is that this hasn't been a good year for the company. We've been losing money to our competitor. They got those Olympic commercials we were trying for, etc." John was confused now. Would he need to know this as a supervisor? Maybe so, he thought. That made sense, he guessed. He should be in the know when it came to raises and such. Then her voice came back into focus. "So, we really need a supervisor who can step in without training and get a jump on things and the new way we're restructuring. And as you know, Barney's son Adam has practically been his right-hand guy." "Right-hand guy?" thought John. Adam was practically a child. He'd been with the company for only 3 years, and that was right out of high school. "I was Barney's right-hand guy." "Well, if I may, ma'am," started John, as she put up her hand to stop him. "And we really want some younger, fresher blood in here to transition with us. We do want to thank you, John, for your years of dedication and hard work, of course." And she handed him the envelope with his name handwritten on it in Barney's handwriting. Are you saying that, am I? We're having to let you go, John." But I don't understand. And it's coming up on Christmas. What will I do? What about my family? He stammered as she stood up, indicating that this was done. John began to stand as well, but his legs were weak. "You'll bounce back, John," she said, as she reached out her hand to shake his. Numbly, he took her hand. It was dry. She hadn't even been nervous to let him go. She walked to the door and opened it. Standing just outside was Adam, dressed in tight, dark jeans, his shirt tucked in only 3 fingers wide, his hair messed just enough that one could tell that he'd put some effort into it. His hands were in his pockets, and he leaned back against the wall, brown leather shoes that tied white bottoms. He nodded his head at John in that kind of too cool to say hello kind of way. Here he was, waiting to go in and take John's job. He didn't look like he'd worked a day in his life, while John's hands had thick calluses from years of working delivery before moving up to working in management. It only took him a few years of heavy lifting to cause him, just 40 years old now, to moan every time he stood up or sat down. Adam brushed past John and into the office that John had just left, and the door was closed. John's heart was beating out of its chest. On one hand, his mind was reeling about how he was going to tell Kim Ann and what they were going to do. They had very little in savings, and it would be difficult to get a job right now in the middle of the holiday season. No one wanted to start the interview process now. Add in a background check, and he doubted that if a miracle happened and he interviewed in the next couple of days, that they'd even hire him until after the new year. Then he remembered the envelope he'd been given, and a sense of relief washed over him. Oh, it must be a severance package, he thought. He opened it quickly, and there was a check inside. Oh, thank God. He leaned his head back. Then he looked back down and read the amount. Confusion once again consumed him. His hands began shaking, tears welled in his eyes, and he became more furious than he had known possible. "We'd like to thank you for your years of service, for your dedication." He stared at the $300 check in disbelief. "Merry Christmas," it read. The card wasn't even signed. It was stamped with the company logo. Kim Ann was devastated, and of course among her many worries was how they would be able to give their children a Christmas. Her heart ached, and seeing her in so much pain and sadness increased John's rage. He hated everything he saw that was supposed to be happy and festive. He loathed seeing people purchasing the newest and best cell phones just because. He became increasingly aware of just how materialistic this holiday truly can be. He sent in resume after resume after resume. He even dropped some off, and still nothing, until one night he saw an ad for someone to play Santa at the mall. He figured that some money was better than no money. And there he was, ringing a bell and asking for donations, essentially begging people for money who just left the expensive department store, technology store, phone store, their bags stuffed with items that would probably never even be used. A fur-lined Fendi bag, ugly leather and wool boots, margarita machines. Seriously? And as they passed his red bucket, they averted their eyes. Ho, 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 he'd yell. Money to help the children of all ages. Have a blessed Christmas. Children. Toys. Ho, ho, ho. Maybe a child would run up and drop a dime in so he or she could get the candy cane that came with the donation. Then they'd reach in and grab a handful. Ho, ho, young man, save some of those for the others. And a parent would stomp over, glaring at John, ask Santa, Well, I never, they'd say. We just spent thousands of dollars in this mall. The least you can do is let him have a few shitty candy canes. And the rage. These self-righteous, entitled jerks. They should get their effing heads bashed in. And so, at the end of his shift, he'd begin to follow a family home. He'd have a box wrapped in his trunk with a big red bow. Nobody ever refused to answer the door to Santa holding a gift. He was always invited in, always trusted. His own children had a lovely Christmas. They got the hottest new toys and expensive, fashionable clothes. Kim Ann received a beautiful diamond bracelet and a fur-lined Fendi bag. He told her that he'd gotten a very large severance check in the mail and decided to splurge just once. He was offered a job with a competing company, which came with a promotion and a large pay increase. And he took it, of course. That one Christmas still haunts the city, and the murders were never solved. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you liked my story, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps. If you'd like to be subscribed and you are not, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, go ahead and ring that bell. Good night.